Sliding into your screen is not just any coffee can. It's a Roastar coffee can. Don't need thousands. Personalize just one in Roastar's Design Lab. No design experience needed. Choose a pattern, add your logo and text, or create something memorable with AI. Being made in the Midwest, you can expect it on your doorstep in no time. Now that was smooth.
Hey everyone, good morning. Welcome to the Coffee People podcast presented by Roastar Coffee Packaging. Thank you for being here today. I'm your host, Ryan Woldt. You can follow or subscribe to the show wherever you're listening, but you'll only find the bonus context, links, recaps, and more on coffeepeoplepodcast.com. Our guest today is Josh Taves. He's the founder and operator of Dialed Coffee Services, based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. You can learn more about what they do while you're listening today by heading to dialedcoffeeservices.com or click through the links in the show's notes to scroll their social media. I'm ready to get started. I have this cup of coffee from Roasted by MAMU Roasters in Hillsboro, Oregon. I brewed it at 16-1 on my Simply Good Coffee brewer on the counter over there. I had the chance to pop into the roaster recently and say hello to the former guest of the pod and owner, Carrie Elliott. This coffee that she shared with me has been quite lovely, and I hope that wherever you are, yours is just as good. You'll need it to best enjoy another episode of the Coffee People podcast. This one featuring Josh Taves, founder of Dialed Coffee Services. To the races. And usually the first thing we do is I ask what your name is and what the company, you're working with, or what's your company and what you do there.
Yep. So my name's Josh Taves, and I own Dialed Coffee Services. We're here in West Michigan, just outside of Grand Rapids. And we, it sort of is like my one-line pitch morphs from time to time, but lately, I've been saying we're barista-focused tech service. So we primarily offer equipment service and repair to the West Michigan market, but we also offer business consulting services, equipment sales, and barista training too.
When you say barista forward,
That's my.
I think I read somewhere that a lot of the employees that work for you as technicians were baristas or have had experience in that. Is that true? And if so, why is that something that's kind of important?
Yep, it's been a little bit of both. Primarily, though, what I look to either train or hire in my employees, it's easier to hire someone who has this experience because I don't own a coffee shop, and so it's hard to train barista skills. But if it's been a little bit of both for employees, but essentially we want to go in and not just make the machines work. We want to make the coffee taste better. And that comes from a blending of both understanding the experience of the barista at a high level, but also how the equipment works in tandem with that. I think a lot of folks either have one or the other. They either know the water's coming out and it's hot, so it must be good. Or they know something doesn't taste right, but they don't understand that it's from a mechanical issue. So we look to kind of marry those two things together in our technicians and be able to say the burrs in this grinder need to be changed because of the way that this, and this is tasting. And also, the manufacturer says this and blah, blah, blah. But, things like that, checking flow rates on AV machines and consistency across group heads when the barista might not know there's something wrong. Those types of things. I guess we try to cross train on those things because we really want people to have better tasting coffee and not just make sure their equipment works.
I can say from personal experience that I know usually when something is wrong, but I could never tell you why. And it's always having the language of some of the things you were just talking about is something that I think would be a value add to barista training as well. Not just like, here's how you make the thing, here's the machine and the components and all that. That wasn't something that I necessarily learned. I'm blaming you, Chris of Coffee Cycle. You can come at me after this. How about you as far as like coffee in general? Do you have any first memories of coffee, or what got you kind of into that world?
I don't know. It was by accident, I guess. I think you sent me that question before we started, and I remember I was thinking my first like memory of coffee. Everyone's got that, some sort of memory of their grandma giving them something that tasted like cigarettes, and I think I had the same kind of thing. It was at a Mimi's Cafe in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I don't think Mimi's Cafe is around anymore, but it was a little mini chain at one point, and she shared with me a sip of her black coffee, and I couldn't imagine why anyone would ever drink that. But from there, when I was 16, I needed a job. It was one of those, like, your parents tell you have to find a job. And my dad owned his own business, and he was writing some quotes. Everything was like pen and paper back then, mostly. And he was at a coffee shop, and he happened to be friends with the manager of the shop, her dad. So he knew this woman who was, she was like 4 years older than me or something, managing this coffee shop. And he was sitting there, and he called me while I was at school, and he said, "Hey, if you can be here by 3:30, they'll give you a job." And I said, "Oh, okay." Can't really say no when you got to get a job as a kid. So I showed up, and I worked there for like a year and a half, and ended up loving it, and just loving like the customer interaction, and I like making a game out of trying to see how many tips I could make, and that kind of thing. And the coffee was bad, but it was supplied by a local roaster who like cared and put some effort in, and we did a lot of things wrong there, but it was just cool. And from there, it was just a cool job to have, I guess. Yeah. And kind of from there, I went on to work at Starbucks for a while, and then kind of continued on. And that was when I was 16, I got that job. So I've been doing this for, I don't know, a long time. I'm tired. 20 years?
A minute.
20 plus, 22 years now?
Yeah, I don't want to.
Coffee doesn't work after a certain
I'm hesitating.
point.
I'm like telling myself, don't shake your finger and say, well, when you get to be my age. You said something that I think is really interesting, and something that I don't know if it happens anymore. I wish people would tell me if it does. But your dad was somewhere talking to a human being, and then called you and kind of had set up this job, and that's a very dad thing to do. But also that you were looking for a job at 16. And it feels like the jobs that were available to me, and sounds like to you at 16, just aren't available to kids anymore. And nor are they necessarily, if they were to apply, it would be through a computer. It wouldn't be in person. The idea, I used to print out 20 resumes at school and then go from business to business handing them out, trying to find someone who would pay me to make enough money to pay my car gas and insurance and stuff.
Yep.
And I worry that that's something that we've lost, is but the opportunity for kids to engage with strangers out of, fear, advancements of technology, or the need for money. And I'm ranting now. You start working in coffee and you kind of get this thing, but I'm assuming you go off into the world. You don't just stay at Starbucks, obviously, or at Mimi's.
Yeah.
What's your career path getting you to the point where you decide to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah. I think there's multiple questions there, whether you realize it or not. But
oh no, I do. I'm very bad about that.
The entrepreneur thing, I think, I watched my dad, own his own business, and I learned from that. I also learned like some of the negatives and some of the positives, and kind of saw like it always excited me for one reason or another, but also I saw the things that I perceived to be mistakes in his business, and kind of like helped to learn, and always had this idea for like, what could I do better? Not because there's any animosity between me and my dad. We have a great relationship, but it's just like, always wanting to improve upon something, I think. And okay, so that's the entrepreneur thing. I think I did like a job shadow week in high school. Again, my dad set me up with someone that he knew, who owned like 7 or 8 Popeyes, like the chicken fast food place.
Yeah.
He did a chicken place, yep. Which was hilarious because this guy was like a big health nut and wouldn't even eat his own food. But he owned all of these fast food restaurants, and he would like take me around, and he showed me his office, and I hung out with him and made copies for a week or whatever. And I remember like he didn't really do anything, and like he drove a nice car and worked like really short hours and like just had other people do stuff for him. I was like, and so I remember asking him like, what do you do here? And he's like, well, I just do what my employees ask me to do at this point. I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool like vision for an entrepreneur. And I'm not that guy, at least not at this point, but I just always thought, I remember like thinking, oh, this is kind of a cool thing. And from that point on, I felt like I wanted to own my own business at some point. So that's one answer to one question.
That's part
the
2
other
of
question,
3, I think.
Coffee. Sorry, were you saying something? I think I cut you off.
No. I for some reason we're kind of staggered a little bit, so I was just following up and saying the third part of that was the coffee specific part as you were moving up through the ranks. Like what got you to the point right before where you are now?
Yep. So I worked, at this little local shop for like a year and a half, and then started working at Starbucks because I was going to go to college and I could transfer stores with them. So it was like, I already had a job where I was going to be going to school because I started and then transferred. And I really actually, I don't know if they still do this, but at the time, they had a pretty robust education program. And I thought that was really cool. I never became a Black Apron, or I don't know if they still do that, but that was what it was called at the time. But, they would pay you to basically like take these classes and learn about coffee. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I was like, well, I get paid to not work sort of, and learn about something that I find interesting. So I started doing that. Eventually realized I was like kind of working at a fast food joint and it became not for me anymore. But at that point I had 3 years of coffee shop experience and I was a college kid. So, all the other college kids that want a job at a coffee shop, like I was the one that could actually get the job because I had experience, right? So yeah, I worked at a different coffee shop, like local coffee shop to local coffee shop, 2 or 3 at a time sometimes, until I got to a point where I felt like I had a pretty solid knowledge base and I wanted to keep learning, but there was no one around locally that I felt like I could really learn a lot from. And so I think 2 things happened at that point. I started looking outside my local community for coffee education, and I started wanting to reinvest what I knew. So I opened up a small barista training and consulting company and would travel up and down the Colorado Front Range doing like little latte art classes and being hired by cafes to do, classes and trainings, and worked with Barista Pro Shop there, which is like a, paper goods and syrups distributor, and we'd teach classes out of their space. But then I also started traveling and going to Coffee Fest, latte art competition, and doing the USBC circuit, which at the time there was a lot more money behind it. I think it was a much bigger production than it seems to be now. But that was in 2010. I did my first United States Barista Championship regional competition, and was kind of hooked. And that became kind of my primary focus in the competition world. I still did, some other things, some other latte art competitions here and there, Coffee Masters when that came to New York for the first time in like 2013 or something. But started competing and used that to build my resume. I also hosted my own year-long competition series all up and down the Colorado Front Range. We do competitions that I got to host, and just kind of really fell into that that arena. And from there, kind of leveraged that into a job with Dogwood Coffee Company in the Twin Cities. I was their wholesale sales and accounts manager with kind of right after they first opened for a couple years, and then continued competing. Let's see, probably 2013, I made it to the national championships for the first time in Boston, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, eventually just kind of like carried through a USBC career until I finished in the finals in 2017, behind Kyle Ramage when he won first place. Yeah, and then was just kind of ready to be done with that chapter at that point. But
yeah, I wanna wrap a little bit backwards there. You mentioned something I thought was really interesting, which was the hosting of events and teaching barista skills kind of up and down the Front Range there in Colorado. You would have had to have you. I'm trying to figure out how to say this, but you said you wanted to keep learning, and the way you did that was to start getting out into the world and teaching other people and being around other people with knowledge that you could sort of gain. Did you realize that at the time that was what you were doing? Was that like a concerted effort, or was that just a byproduct of wanting to continue to be involved? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I'd say it was intentional. I think I felt like because of the lack of formal education in the coffee industry at the moment or at that time, we needed to. I needed to be a small fish in a big pond if I wanted to keep learning. And at the time, I was the medium to big size fish in a small pond. And so I intentionally kind of pushed myself outside of my pond, basically, because I wanted to be around people that were more knowledgeable than I was. And that came through traveling, which I think, like, I don't know if this is still the case, but it used to be like a lot of people said, like, well, I can't afford that. And like, well, I was working 30 hours a week as a barista and going to school and made it work, because that was what I really wanted. And I think part of that was then, being able to teach others. And that really kind of allowed me to grow my network that I still leverage today all up and down the Colorado Front Range. Some of that just came from, like, at the time there was 2 coffee companies within an hour and a half drive of me. One of them hosted cuppings, I think, every other week. And the other one hosted a once a month latte art competition that was mostly just for their staff, but they opened it up to the public too if anyone wanted to come. And I went to both of those events as much as I could. And that was a part of it, getting to cup and taste a lot of different coffees and getting to pour latte art along some really good side baristas, really good alongside some really good baristas. And from there, it just became like, well, you're meeting all these people within a 2-hour radius, and then, just start working with them in as many ways as possible.
Somewhere along the line, and actually the reason that I first kind of the first thing I understood about you was you became an inventor, right? If I'm not understanding, you invented this thing called the cupping brewer. Could you talk a little bit about what inspired that, and why isn't it what you're focused on now?
Great question. The cupping
I say
brewer.
that
So that was
a little bit. Sorry to interrupt. I say that a little bit because I have had some other things that felt like this is the thing I'm going to do forever, and then eventually I didn't. And so I'm always curious as to those transitions in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think. So just briefly, the cupping brewer, if listeners are not familiar, I guess is a well, I've got one. You want me to go show you what it looks like? I think people have maybe seen it, but
yeah, that'd be awesome.
So it looks like this. It's a cupping vessel, right? So it's designed to produce 12 ounces of liquid, of usable, drinkable liquid. Total, it holds 500 milliliters. And so the idea is you cup in it, right? It's 30 grams of coffee grounds in here, 500 milliliters of water, which is SCA standard cupping recipe. Break the crust, scrape the top. There's a pretty shallow slope here, so all the grounds fall unimpeded down below. When you're ready to drink, you've skimmed the top. You'd normally go in with your cupping spoon and start slurping. You could just put this guy in here real gentle, and then you can hold it in with your thumb, and you can pour the liquid up here out, and everything below stays sealed. So you get just the liquid of the cupping without any of the grounds, and you can pour it then into a cup, right? That allows you to share in a hygienic way. It allows you to, share in public cuppings with people who maybe have never cupped before. And what I found, having led hundreds of public cuppings at this point, is that the spoon is often the biggest barrier to entry for folks that just want to enjoy the experience. But when you can show them the experience and they can still drink it from a familiar vessel, that really helps. So anyways, that was the idea. It's probably 15 years ago, come up with that. Well, no, I can say 2015 maybe. I built a prototype out of like copper pipe and valves and took it to a Barista Nation event. I don't think Barista Nation's around anymore, but they had like a inventor's idea competition.
Yeah.
And I took that and I won. And I remember at the time, Jordan Michelman, who's one of the founders of Sprudge, pulled me aside, and we were kind of friends at that point. And he's like, "Hey, man, do you have a patent on this thing?" And I was like, "No, I don't." I was kind of waiting to see if I got any traction. And he's like, "If you don't patent it, someone else is gonna, like, as soon as we send out this article." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, maybe I should do that." So figured that out in a hurry. And yeah, ended up working with the team at Rattleware, Marcus Bonney in particular, to kind of help bring it to market, and they were great. I think in the end, there were some mistakes made along the way in the marketing and production of things. I mean, not the production side of things, but I think it was just like, it was never really marketed properly. Maybe I held on to it a little too tightly when I should have let other people take the reins. I don't know, but it never really gained the traction that we hoped, I think it's expensive to make even something this simple and get, whatever, 10,000 units to market. And, in general, it's been sold all around the world, several, 10 to 15,000 units probably, but that's, you're making a couple dollars per unit.
Cool.
It doesn't really.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think, it's cool to be out there, but it never really took off the way that I wanted. And it seemed like I tried several times to kind of reinvigorate or put different kinds of effort into it, and I never really got the return. And so in the end, I sort of lost interest, I think. But if somebody else wants to, take over,
reach out to Josh.
Give me a call.
Yeah, I would. Honestly, it kind of feels like it was made for the pandemic era, just a little too soon. It just kind of hit the market a little early.
Yeah. And we definitely tried kind of rejuvenating it during the pandemic, and got some traction. But again, still we had some issues with the marketing and fulfillment that just sort of made it difficult.
Yeah, I went to a cupping, my first cupping kind of post-pandemic era, launching. I'm not saying anyone's out of the pandemic, because we just had COVID in our house.
Mm-hmm.
But the first cupping I went to, where we all had two spoons, and they were trying to say this was a new hygienic way that they were doing it, where you scoop from one spoon onto the other and the whole thing. And I was like, but we're all still standing within like a foot of each other. So no matter what you do here, like at some point, somebody's going to forget, put the wrong spoon in their mouth, and it's just going to be this whole operation. Mm-hmm. So we do the best we can. You are in Western Michigan now, not your home state. What got you to Michigan? And what is the deal here with two-part question again? Dialed coffee services. What inspired that as a need? Because I was just in Western Michigan this summer, and outside of Grand Rapids, it felt like, hey, this is a great place to be out under the trees and maybe at the beach. But as far as coffee goes, it seems like it's still growing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think like to kind of continue my journey getting here, I started working in business development for roasters, sales, and then business development, and learned that I really like project and systems management, and I liked the business development side of things, but I also liked quality control and coffee quality. And so I did that. Honestly, I shifted into that mode for 10 years ish or so, worked for multiple different roasters around the country doing that. And I came to Michigan because my wife's family is from here and we've got kids. And so we, wanted some more babysitters basically. And I was working for Stovetop Coffee Roasters doing business development here. And then kind of got to the point where I was like, I'm ready to stop building other people's businesses and start building my own. I grew up fixing stuff, working with my hands. Again, my dad owned his own business. Like I've said several times, it was custom furniture. So I go work with him in the summers in his wood shop. And always liked tinkering with coffee equipment, or always had some kind of mechanical project going on the side anyways. And when I was ready to start my own business, I saw a big hole in the market that there wasn't a good quality service provider in the area that was meeting the needs of folks who cared about their product. So, I mean, I already had a lot of the contacts and the people I needed to talk to, both on the manufacturer side and on the local supplier side, and just kind of put together a business plan, mostly targeted at partnering with roasters as a technician arm of their wholesale program. So rather than saying like, hey, Joe Schmo Cafe, let us fix your machines, we started out pitching to roasters and saying like, let us handle the service for your 50 customers, and we can work together in that vein. So it made our sales meetings much more efficient. And within the first year, we're able to have, a couple hundred places we were offering service to because of that. So
if you were to say, I know you can't say that you have favorite customers, I assume, but the next time I stop into Grand Rapids, where should I get a cup of coffee?
Yeah, sure. Well, so right near our shop, we've got Littlefoot Roasters, which are some awesome like ex-intelligentsia folks from Chicago, but they're ex-intelligentsia back 10 years ago, when they were a little more at their peak, in my opinion. And then Wild Roast is not far from there too. They both do a pretty decent job. Or then I generally send folks to I don't know, I guess I would call it the Coffee Triangle, because there's 3 really good shops in Grand Rapids that are all within like a 5 to 10 minute walk of each other. You've got the Madcap Roastery is right there. You've got Stovetop Coffee Roasters flagship store is like a block and a half down. And then Lion Street Coffee does a really good job and has a phenomenal bakery that they're attached to. And they're all kind of right there. So that's generally where I send folks depending on the situation. Not my favorites. So
How long has
that?
I totally fair. I spent a couple of days sitting at Littlefoot earlier this summer. So definitely one of my favorites, I can say, because it's the only one I've been to.
Sorry, when we first started, we were actually operating out of the back of Littlefoot. There you go.
How long have you been open?
We started October 1st, 2023. So 2.5 years now.
What would you say, what have you learned in the first 2 years of running this new business?
Wow. That's a good question. I think I've learned a lot about fixing machines, obviously. I mean, I had a lot of experience before, but had never been a full-time technician. So kind of jumping into that with both feet has been really fun and interesting. And honestly, I don't go out on the road much anymore, maybe 1 or 2 calls a week tops. and my technicians handle all that work now. So yeah, that's been really cool to kind of like learn a lot more intimately about espresso machines and coffee brewers and how they work. Other than that, I think some of the biggest lessons for me in the last 2.5 years have been, I'm always learning about people management. I want to be a good boss, and I want to, manage people effectively, given all their different personalities and nuances and such. But also, I think marketing has always been a bit of a mystery to me, and so I've gotten to use these last 2.5 years as like a testing ground for kind of like all sorts of different marketing schemes, like mailers and Google ads and meta ads and word of mouth and flyers and, kind of anything and everything, and see what works and what doesn't. And I've really been able to kind of refine what works well for our customer base, specifically B2B marketing on a very niche operation. And so that's been kind of fun. And now we kind of like really dial down on like two or three different marketing streams that seem to work really well for us. So,
are you willing to share those so we can all just skip ahead, or is that staying close to the best?
Well, I will say there's a lot of different options, and I'm sure that different people have different things that work for them. I am specifically trying to market to people who are decision makers at coffee companies, which there's like, 15 of those. That's not true, but it's a very small segment of people to find. So what works well for us, honestly, probably the most effective is just walking in and handing a flyer out. But other than that, we do Google marketing ads, so like search ads, and we've got 3 or 4 different types of campaigns, which don't even ask me what that means. I just work with our marketing advisor on that stuff. Reviews has been a big thing for us. So we've got an automated system that asks for reviews after our jobs are closed, Google reviews, and then Instagram content, but specific kinds of Instagram content. People like how-to videos or tech tip videos, and they like pictures of pretty machines. Those things tend to kind of do the best for us, and then other various types of content doesn't get as much traction. So
you're not just a coffee person. You mentioned earlier you're a parent, and I know just from my cursory research, you're passionate about being in the outdoors. Where do you find overlap in your life? Has being a business owner allowed you to do some of those other things that are important to you? Where do you find your roles? The lessons learned are similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the primary impeti. What's plural of impetus?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, impetuses.
I'm sure somebody's AI will fix it for them.
Yeah, hopefully. Was to actually have more time and work less, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but yeah, I started my own business to work less, is the long and short of it. And so what that means for me is like, being able to, because my wife works part-time, and so being able to like pick the kids up from school on days we need that, or go to my daughter's basketball game. I'm going bowling with one of my daughter's school classes next Friday, and like I don't have to ask anybody if I can do that. I can just go. So I think that, yeah, that's been really cool, like helpful for our family. One of our kids has some pretty severe special needs and needs a lot of help throughout the day, and so I get to be a part of that, which is great. But then as far as like being connected with the outdoors, I do usually take almost a whole month off, and just allow my staff to kind of run the show here. And I work pretty hard throughout the year to make sure they're set up to do that so I can leave without stress, and go do a big trip out west. This is another thing if you want to get into it, but typically do a lot of hunting on that trip and try to fill our freezer so that we can not buy meat at the grocery store for the year.
Sure. Why do you
Different kind of
find
work.
what does that time away do for you? Do you think that it makes you a better human, a better boss, a better husband? I don't know. I'm assuming your family may be involved in some capacity in these trips. I don't want to presume or have you get too personal if you don't want, but are you going out there to rejuvenate? Are you going out there just because you enjoy it? What do you take away from that when you come back?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So typically what it ends up being is I go by myself, maybe meet up with some friends when I'm there for part of the time, maybe not. I think it really gives me a lot of time to kind of reflect internally and reset. I think, with kids, it seems like you can get so kind of in the weeds with the stuff and the siblings fighting and the, this, that, and the other thing. And it gives me time to kind of get above that and kind of give perspective of who I want to be as a parent. I think that the focus, like I said, is usually to where my food comes from is very important to me. And that kind of is a part of why my interest in the coffee is what it is. And so I really try to focus on bringing home a freezer full of meat for my family because I want them to have that healthy food. I don't want us to have to participate in I'm not going to get on a soapbox about this, but I don't want us to have to participate in in the global meat industry as much as we can remove ourselves from that. And that matters. And in some ways, that feels like me caring for my family. And I think my wife and I are on the same page there. But as far as the business goes, I think it really helps me stress test things and see, because a lot of the time I won't even have phone service when I'm gone, right? So I'm not working remote. I'm gone, and they're doing it or they're not, and it really kind of reinforces people's strengths and weaknesses, and I get to come back and see ooh, I gave you this responsibility and I probably shouldn't have, or you did really good at this. Let's try to give you more of that, and helps just kind of improve or oh, this thing fell through the cracks. We need to make sure we have coverage for that in the future. And it just helps stress test the business, I think, and helps us grow in a weird way.
What makes for a good cup of coffee?
A long time ago, okay. I'm gonna. That was only one question, but I'm gonna give you two answers. Okay, and see what we're doing there.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think at first I just had this conversation with a customer the other day. They wanted to learn more about coffee, and they were really pushing me well, how do I make a good shot of espresso? I'm like, I don't know, man. That doesn't exist. What? Well, it does, but I can't tell you what a good shot of espresso is because it's based around what you like. I think if you wanted to ask me, what does the Specialty Coffee Association say is a good shot of espresso? That's a different question. Or what is a good shot of espresso in a competition setting? That's a different question. But to say, what is a good cup of coffee? What is a good shot of espresso? Make what you like, and just try different things. I encourage people try different grind settings, try different types of coffee because it helps them find what they like and stick with it. And once you understand what you're into, that's what's a good cup of coffee for you. Now, my second answer is if you're asking me what I think is a good cup of coffee, a long time ago, I started saying, it's something that's interesting. It's something that sticks out. Because I've just cupped so many coffees in my lifetime. It's sweet, floral, clean. You don't see those as much, especially anymore, but I've seen them hundreds of times. And so what sticks out to me is something unique. Like I think, okay, the last time I had a memorable cup of coffee was at SCA last year in Houston at the Roasters Village, which is just getting like excessive at this point. There's so many things to try. But there was a group called Coffee Wallas. I hope I'm not saying this wrong, but they only did specialty coffee out of Indonesia, I believe.
Mhm.
And I was like, yeah, okay, whatever, mushrooms and dirt and can still be good and have some acidity, Sulawesi and Tuarco does some good stuff. But they shared with me these like really interesting coffees. I think it's just Southeast Asia in general. They had like a Chinese coffee, and like it was not a 87 point coffee, but it was like clean and had nice acidity and was relatively well balanced. And I was like, this coffee is memorable because this is not what I expected, and they're doing something different, right? And so was it the best cup of coffee I had that weekend? Nope. But it was the most memorable. And that's the thing that sticks out for me nowadays when someone says, what's a good cup of coffee? It's like, well, I'd rather have like I also think about somebody served me a cup of coffee and I tasted it and I was like, okay, maybe 80 point blender lot, I was like, what is this? And it's like, oh, it's a Robusta grown at 200 feet above sea level in Uganda. And I was just like floored. And I was like, okay, that's the memorable cup of coffee for me for a while, because even though it was like barely passable as specialty, I definitely would have not have expected that from that setting, that type of growing environment. So I don't know. That's my answer.
Do you have a piece of advice, piece of wisdom, something that's stuck with you over the years or that you've kind of come up with that you would be willing to pass on? Could be entrepreneurial, could be coffee, could be other.
I think a lot of people in coffee land forget that it's just like brown water. It's not your life force. It's not something to fight with people about. Um, don't take it too seriously. I think like it's okay to be really excited about it. Um, and it's okay to voraciously devour all the knowledge you can. I just really hope you don't find your being in coffee, because it'll probably let you down. Not that there's anything wrong with coffee. It's just coffee, I think is what I'm trying to say. Um, and yeah.
I I want to make sure that we're coming up on 45 minutes. So, what comes next for Dialed Coffee Services? How can people learn more about it, or what is it that you would hope that people would take away from this show about the business that you're running?
Well, I hope if you're in West Michigan that you call us for your coffee equipment needs. We go all the way to northern Indiana, and I hope that if you are a experienced technician in the Detroit area, that you call me and say that you're interested in being a remote technician for us on that side of the state. And I hope that we're able to connect with other like-minded folks around the country. Get on to servicelayer.com or servicelayer.coffee. They are a network of like-minded service technicians around the country, and you can connect with a service technician who is coffee quality and barista focused in your area, regardless of where you're at in the U.S. There,
Oh,
how's
that's
that?
cool. That was perfect. It's like you've been doing this your whole life. When you walk into a coffee shop somewhere and they don't know who you are, so they're not trying to ply you with freebies and goodies, what is it that you order?
Coffee. I used to like even try to like interpret the the specialty coffees or the pour over option for the day or whatever. And I still do that, but a lot of the time it's like a good coffee shop's going to have good batch brew. And if they have crappy batch brew, but then serve like a geisha on pour over, it's like, well, you're not really a good coffee shop then, are you? And I want to see what the place is capable of and what the baristas are interested in. And generally that's the batch brew for the day. So just order batch brew.
What did we miss today? Anything else that we should share?
I don't think so. I like where I'm at right now. I like done a lot of things in coffee industry, and I really enjoy owning my own business and feel very blessed and thankful to be able to be where I'm at and do what I'm doing and get to have the influence I do on the coffee industry around me, and fixing stuff is pretty fun. Good folks
As
everywhere,
somebody,
everywhere in coffee world.
as somebody who also has some white in his beard, yours is a very specific streak. I'm wondering if there's a trauma that we need to discuss on the air.
I've got 3 kids.
Okay, Josh, I really appreciate your time and sharing what you've done and where you're going with us. And I hope we get a chance to have a cup of coffee in person.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be fun. Good to hang with you.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Please subscribe to our newsletter at coffeepeoplepodcast.com. Cheers.